letting y'all know we are now live on YouTube. We'll get started in about 5 minutes, Mayor, if you're looking to call.
Yes, thank you.
Ayla, do you have the link, or would you like me to update the website?
I've already updated it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My mobile phone indicates that it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 12th of May, 2020. Welcome all of you here. This is an emergency meeting of the Conway City Council. It appears that all council members are present, perhaps with the exception of Councilman William Goldfinch. Am I correct?
William is on as well, Mayor.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
you are?
Hey.
Okay. I'm so sorry, William. I just hadn't been able to see you yet. Welcome. So glad that you are here. If you'll join me in a short prayer, please. Dear God, we do thank you for this day. We ask that you stand with us as we continue to try to navigate reasonably and practically around the COVID-19 virus, knowing that you are our keeper and our sustainer. Please be with us this day and all days. Amen. We have a single item on the agenda. Is there a reason in this circumstance, Adam, to actually approve the agenda?
I think it's optional at this point, Mayor. It's one item. I think we can just get right into it.
All right, thank you so much. That one item is consideration of extension of declaration of state of emergency related to the COVID-19 coronavirus. If you would just give us a bit of background, please, Adam.
Sure, Mayor. Thank you, first of all, for making yourself available for this meeting. Way back in March, when y'all declared a state of emergency for the coronavirus, I know that many of you thought it would only be a couple weeks and we could rescind the state of emergency, but I don't think anyone expected us to be here 60 days later and looking at extending it further. But here we are. This week I've had several calls from some of you asking if we really needed to extend it at all when it is set to expire. So what I want to do is address this and go over a little bit of a little bit more even than what I discussed with those council people and give you sort of a preview of our reopening plan as well. First, we are not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. No matter where you stand on the validity of the shutdown, of the quarantines, of the reaction, or maybe even your opinion, overreaction of our country to the coronavirus, it's still here. And we still need to be wary about its impact or potential impact on our citizens and our staff. I'm sharing my screen with you right now, showing the zip code map, which Stephen Williams and our GIS department tracks daily. This is using information that we're able to get from DHEC, showing the number of cases per zip code in the county. You can see here from our last meeting that the 29527 zip code, which is the Conway West Southwest, is no longer the darkest red. This is one of those things where we don't want to be leading the pack for the county. So it's a little unusual for us to look at the map and not want to be the best, because best here is worst. The South Strand has now become the most densely positive testing area, but 29527 is right behind it. You can also see here that Loris in the last week has had a spike. Loris was, I think, yellow or green just last week when we met as a council. And now it's caught up here to our 29527 zip code. So in 1 week, you can see how quickly this virus can change an area and change the way you need to respond. This is absolutely our fear for the city of Conway. Today, we're doing fine. We've been very steady and flat, and I'll show you a graph on that in a second. But by next week, we could have an outbreak in the city that could spread, threatening our ability to continue offering services. And that's part of the reason that I'm recommending we extend the state of emergency today. Statewide, our numbers are not dropping either. Let me see here. These are the weekly totals statewide. So if you look at the daily totals, I think I showed you that graph that had no, you couldn't really rely upon that graph at all. But if you look here at the weekly totals, you can see that there's some consistency here. They're not dropping. You can call it consistent, you can call it flat, you can call it whatever you want, but they're pretty steady. We're right at that average of just over 1,000 cases per week in the state. Those are 1,000 new cases per 1,000 new cases per week. Keep in mind also that we're only testing about 1% of the population of the state, and that DHEC is intending to ramp that up to double the testing so far, and get to at least 2% and do so pretty quickly. They are seeing a consistent 9 to 12% positive test response every time they do testing. So for every 100 tests, they're getting between 9 and 12 positive. It doesn't matter if they do 1,000 or 10,000, they're still seeing that consistent 9 to 12% positive response. The point I'm making here is that we should expect to see a jump in the positives in the next couple of weeks as they ramp up their testing. So back to the local Horry County jump in recent days. Let me advance to this slide. You can see here what it looks like for Horry County and Conway. The green is Conway. You can see again, it's been fairly flat. It's been increasing by one every 2 or 3 days. Certainly we would like it to stay completely flat and not increase at all, but you can see that it's not increasing by a big jump. But if you look at the Horry County numbers there, you can see that between April 26th and 28th, there was a huge spike from 164 to 215, and that has been continuously climbing in those last couple weeks. So Horry County is seeing a pretty high spike in the number of cases just from what we're getting in from DHEC. And this is using the same zip code data, just put in a different format to show you what it looks like here locally. while all this is going on, while we're seeing the steady numbers or the increase in numbers, the state is reopening, as you've seen. We've allowed restaurants to do outdoor dining. On just yesterday, we allowed them to do indoor dining at a reduced capacity. On Monday, salons and gyms will reopen. And there's no reason to think that the increase in numbers is going to start decreasing magically, even though we're reopening the economy. So we need to be able to be responsive to that increase in potential numbers. There's also another reason besides just keeping people diligent to continue the state of emergency. There's federal funding attached to emergency response. Were we to have an outbreak in the city in the next week, and we needed to facilitate a response with overtime or PPE, personal protective equipment, or other emergency procurement actions, we can be reimbursed for some of these responses and some of these expenses that were made in response to the disaster. And in this case, we're speaking from a lot of experience. Since 2015, we've had, or 14, even with the ice storm, we've had almost one of these per year. At the last council meeting, I mentioned that we just received a check for $73,000 from our response for Hurricane Dorian. That was overtime expenditures and feeding our staff and our PPE for that event. We had very little damage in the city, but we still were able to get reimbursed for our ramping up operations for response. So, and we're waiting for more than $1 million from Hurricane Florence, still for that same thing that is reimbursable. So these reimbursements are possible in part because of our declared state of emergency. Were it to expire and there to be a spike or something that required a response, we may not be able to get reimbursed for those expenses after Thursday when the current state of emergency expires. And finally, we need to be responsive to our needs of our business community. Much like the relaxing of the rules that we allowed for outdoor dining, we need to be able to respond to the next round of needs from our other businesses, our gyms, our salons, and the like. Without the state of emergency, that relaxing has to end, and we go back to the enforcement of our rules that are on the books as they are right now. If you look at the actions of the city thus far since March, while we've been under the state of emergency, unless you believe heavily that your rights have been infringed upon by the closures of the playgrounds, of the dog parks, the tennis courts, we haven't restricted movements or activities at all in the local level. We're following the state orders, the governor's orders in that respect, but as the state continues to reopen, so are we. So today's action isn't to tighten the restrictions, but rather it's to continue to allow us to be flexible in our response and still protect our citizens and employees. And I think that's primarily why we're recommending that we extend the state of emergency for another 60 days or less if ended sooner, to allow us to continue that flexible response while protecting our needs of our citizens and our staff. And finally, and this is a little bit off topic with the recommendation for the declaration, but we've talked a little bit about a reopening plan. And I know that Councilman Hubbard was on a staff call last week about our consideration of a reopening plan. So I want to just kind of show you what that looks like for the city. With the governor's orders yesterday to take effect Monday, that implements our phase one reopening, which would reopen the tennis courts and lessons. We've got a phased lesson plan too, but a phase one lessons only. Our basketball courts for small group play, our dog parks, as long as social distancing is adhered to, our recreational fields for individual usage. Again, social distancing rules apply, but we can allow them to be used individual play. We can resume our yard sale permits. And what we'll do is we'll strategically position outdoor hand sanitizing stations and signage at each facility that's reopened and encourage or require people to use that hand sanitizer as they come on and off the courts or as they start and end play. And that's phase one. And that, again, was made available by the governor relaxing the rules starting this upcoming Monday, the 18th, for reopening athletic and recreational facilities that allow us to do this. So that will start on Monday, the 18th. Phase two, we hope to be able to start on June 1st. This would allow us to reopen playgrounds, starting with daily pressure washing, much like we did with the phase closing. This is the phased reopening. Reopen the playgrounds with daily pressure washing, reopen the recreation center with some capacity restrictions, and we'll close midday for a sanitizing break. We'll reopen the buildings to the public or by appointment or with limitations. I think we can start opening the buildings here for more public interaction. And court will resume with limited capacity. City council can resume meetings in person with limited staff and attendance. We may not meet in City Hall. We may look at an alternate venue to allow us to spread out more. And I'm going to speak to the mayor a little bit about this after the meeting and try to pick which venue best suits our needs. And then we can begin outdoor recreation classes as well. Within our recreation center, if we were to do Zumba or yoga or some of those intense athletic activities as classes, it would bring people too close together, I think, to safely do it. So we're going to try to bring some of those classes outdoors, but still be able to offer those services to our patrons, but do so in a way that is more safe. And then we can allow for 2 employees to share a vehicle if necessary. Again, this is to start June 1st, presuming that we're still on the governor's schedule here of reopening. And then we have a phase 3 also, which would be getting things back to what we would now consider a new normal. We've reopened the buildings to the public, including the finance building. Summer recreation leagues could commence, baseball and soccer leagues. We'd start our summer day camps. Our pools would reopen in full, and our facilities would resume that new normal daily activity, as well as special event approvals resuming. This is going to depend largely upon the governor relaxing his social distancing rules of no groups of 10 or more, or 10 or less, 10 or more. But that is the intent, is to be able to get back to a normal as the governor reopens the state. So that is the plan. That is what we'd like to do. So, Monday, we'd like to be able to start implementing that. We'd love to be able to open the recreation center on Monday too. It is allowed by the governor's orders, but we have a lot of recreation staff still out there not employed, and we need to ramp our employment back up in the rec department before we can open that building and do so safely and responsibly. So that is our recommendation, is to continue the state of emergency for another 60 days, unless ended sooner by this council, and to begin the phased reopening of the city, starting with phase 1 on Monday.
I have a question, Adam.
Of course.
Do you believe that it would be an undue infringement on a person's rights, particularly during phase 1, if we're carefully approaching a resumption of normalcy, to require early on at tennis courts and for basketball gatherings at the dog park and such, to require the use of a face mask?
I don't know that it would be difficult for people to do. I think it would be difficult for us to enforce. Again, we're still understaffed now in our rec department. We would have to position someone at those facilities, basically from sun up to sundown, to be able to enforce that. Unless we just do a general patrol, which we plan to do anyway, and remove people from the courts that don't have masks.
Well, yeah, and I would think of it much like the earlier restriction of gatherings of more than 3 people, where our police would approach a larger group and encourage them to follow the rules as set forth, but without any strong enforcement.
I think if we were to do that, Mayor, we would have to have enough masks on hand to distribute to those kids playing without them, because I think what we'll find is a lot of the kids playing sports are not going to have masks either available to them or with them while they're playing. And I don't think we can expect them to go home and get one or not come back without one. I think if we have enough to do that, and we might have that at the outset within our supplies to be able to hand some of those out.
I just think it's something worth thinking about, because we're talking about how the virus remains as a risk, certainly has the possibility of impacting us in negative ways. And when I consider basketball, for example, I mean, people are like all over each other, yes, even in small groups. It would just be beneficial to everybody involved if in those circumstances they were wearing a mask.
Mayor, you have a question from Councilman Goldfinch.
All right, and I can't see that. I can't see hands. Mr. Goldfinch.
Hey, Mayor. Hey, everyone. I sort of, going back to phase one, I sort of agree with the mayor. And y'all know I'm all for let's phase this in. Basketball, and I don't have the answer, and I'm not going to propose an answer, but that is a very close contact. I mean, you're all up on top of people. But looking at tennis and saying only lessons, why not just tennis play? I mean, you got one person on one side of the court. You got one. I mean, that is not a close contact sport.
Let me clarify. Tennis courts will be reopened to the public, but if lessons are to be given, we have a phased lesson plan also. So a lot of times what you'll see is there's a group lesson of 6 kids and one instructor hitting ball after ball after ball. What we're limiting the lessons to a phased plan, but the courts will be open for open play all the time. But the lessons would be phased in. So yeah, that was,
Thank you for that clarity.
and I'm sorry that was not clear. Yes.
Anyone else? I don't know if anybody is actually trying to get my attention. Ms. Tim?
Larry,
Larry.
Larry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
yes, ma'am. My thinking is a question rather. Suppose with the businesses being open, someone was to contract the virus, would the city be responsible in any form or fashion?
There's no liability that I can see on a business being opened and someone contracting it because of the business.
Okay, very good.
The concern that we've had as a city, and honestly this is throughout the country, is contracting the COVID virus while you're at work a workers' compensation related claim. And there's not been clear guidance given from anywhere yet. It'll probably result in some litigation to sort that out. But as of right now, it is or it isn't. We don't, we'll address that as it comes. Hopefully no one on staff contracts it and we don't have to worry about it. But the reality is someone probably will at some point, and we'll just deal with it when it happens. And Madam Mayor, I think Councilwoman Timms has her hand up as well.
Ms. Timms? She was the only one I saw earlier. Ms. Timms, go ahead.
I have a concern about the face mask versus no face mask when we're in the middle of group activities. Nobody hates them more than I do, and I'll stay home before I wear one. But my problem is if children are out playing, I do think as a parent, I might be concerned if other children were not. Somebody's got to either say this is the rule or it's not the rule. We just can't say we wear them or don't wear them, because you're going to cut out half the people that don't come, or you.
I think we lost Jean.
I think so. In the meantime, let's hear from Mr. Goldfinch and we'll allow.
I don't know.
Ms. Timms?
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Goldfinch, if you'd give us 1 second, I think Ms. Timms might be back.
Of course.
Are you with us, Ms. Timms? Mr. Goldfinch, please proceed.
So if I don't know how many of you go to Costco, I tell you, they've sort of been the leader in this whole crisis, going back and providing, the spacing and the plexiglass. They were some of the first to do this. They now require you to wear a mask when you go into Costco. And I took, I had the boys the other day, and I took both of them, and they give you a mask at the door. And I told them, if you pull your hands out of your pockets, you're going to get a spanking when we get home. And of course, they didn't touch anything. They were constantly pulling the mask on and off. And, I get it, but I question to Adam's point earlier, when you've got kids on a basketball field or a tennis court or a soccer field or what have you, is it really something that we can enforce? And are these particularly smaller kids, they got the fat mask on their face, they're constantly touching it and pulling it down and scratching their nose. And I really question how effective it would be. I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfinch. Ms. Timms, I think you're back.
I don't have a problem with activities that are spaced apart, but first of all, I'm not quite sure I even understand how we can do basketball right now. But I certainly would be alarmed if the children did. I know it's a pain to wear a mask. I hate it, but I do think that it's necessary.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else have any comments? If we don't require masks, I'd certainly insist that we recommend them strongly. And
That would be staff's recommendation, is to encourage strongly, but not have a repercussion for not doing so. I don't know that we can police that in this sort of setting. And it's council's will. We will certainly do whatever we're instructed to do.
right.
But
Well, this is the last thing I'll say about masks. What I've noticed in my own unscientific view of what's going on around us is, as soon as outdoor dining, for example, was allowed, was no longer restricted, immediately I'd go into a place, whether it be a retail establishment or a restaurant, to pick up food. And I mean, just on a dime, the next day, I'd be the only person among 20 who was wearing a mask. I think the tendency of human beings is that if our government says we can go back to something that looks normal, then it must be okay for us to act as if everything is normal again. I just think that we'll pay for that over the long run, and I won't say any more about it. Doesn't sound like we've got the support we need. Mr. White?
Yes, on that same note, I think that if we are going to require it, that at least whenever a patrolman is patrolling the area, he or she should have some masks to give to the kids so that they can at least show that this is what we're expecting of you.
Agreed.
That makes sense. Ms. Timms?
I'm just going back to days when I was in the classroom. I couldn't have partial rules for my students. They either had to do something, it was a rule, or it wasn't a rule. And I do think that if we're allowing activities that we're sponsoring, that we have the right to make the rule as to what it should be.
Yes, ma'am. So while this discussion is underway, is there anyone who would like to actually make a motion relative to how we allow some of these activities? What I'm hearing more specifically about is basketball. If there's not, then we can just move forward.
And Mayor, the only thing we really, certainly the big thing here is obviously the state of emergency declaration. But
Absolutely.
obviously, as we get to the reopening, if there's anything individually that you do not like or would like to restrict or augment, please, this is a great time to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Ms. Timms?
I make a motion to extend the state of emergency for the next phase.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfinch.
Mayor, I second Ms. Timms' motion.
Thank you so much. We have a properly seconded motion to extend the state of emergency. Can we be more specific, and would both of you agree that that extension be set for 60 days with the understanding that should it not be needed for that length of time, that it can be rescinded?
That's fine. I'll encompass that into my motion, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Goldfinch? All right, very good. So now we have a properly seconded motion to extend the state of emergency for an additional 60 days. Is there any discussion? Mr. Goldfinch?
Mayor, I just want to emphasize again, there are, and obviously I support it because I seconded it. There are concerns out there in the community. We got to take this thing seriously, but I don't want to incite fear. I don't want to step on people's rights. I am supporting this because, it opens us up for flexibility. It gives staff, the administrator, us the flexibility to bring in people and to do things that we otherwise wouldn't. It opens us up for FEMA reimbursements, for things like that. And I want that to be the headline, not, Conway declares state of emergency and we're all running out in the streets. And so I just want to be on the record with that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you don't mind me saying, I believe that is the council's intent, that it's done for those reasons and for no other reasons. Thank you so much for making that clear. Are there any other comments or questions? There being none, I will now call a vote. All in favor of a 60-day extension of the state of emergency by the city of Conway, if you will indicate so at this time. I vote yes.
That
I
is,
don't have the same screen with which to indicate with a thumbs up. I see that Ms. Timms had voted yes. Mr. Goldfinch has voted yes. I believe Mr. White has, and I've lost my view of the other members of council.
it was unanimous, Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. So the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. And at this time, with there being opportunity for us to think deeper and plan further relative to the phases of our reopening our city, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. I move then that the meeting be adjourned. Is there a second?
Both Mr. Hyman and Mr. Hubbard raised their hand.
Thank you so much. So we have a second. All in favor, if you would indicate now at this time, please. Thank you. And I'm assuming it's
It is
unanimous.
unanimous, Mayor.
Thank you so much. That concludes this emergency meeting of the Conway City Council. Thank you all for your support.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah.